This was a life and death confrontation between two powerful nomadic peoples. One side was the steel cavalry of the Mongols, representing the most formidable fighting force of the 13th century, while the other was the renowned Jurchen warriors, famed for their righteousness and said to be invincible under heaven. Before this, in several hundred years of East Asian continental history, no battle of such vast scale had ever occurred. Neither the two northern expeditions of Zhao Guangyi by the Song dynasty against the Liao, nor the decisive clash before the Song and Liao signed the Treaty of Chanyuan, nor even the Jinkang incident when the Jin destroyed the northern Song had ever mobilized so many troops. This battle would determine the rise or fall and survival of the Mongol and Jin empires. The victor would certainly possess all the northern steppe and might even dominate the entire East Asian continent. But the price for the loser was not merely withdrawing from the struggle, it meant irreversible collapse, even the destruction of their nation. In August 1211, at the border between the Mongolian plateau and the North China Plain, when hundreds of thousands of cavalry from both sides confronted each other at the strategic and fortified Aiku, the battle at Yehuling was destined to create a moment that would change history. The deep enmity between the two peoples began in 1127, during the Jinkang incident that led to the fall of the northern Song. Before that, they had no profound hatred. In fact, during the destruction of the Liao, they even maintained a brief alliance. Both were northern ethnic groups who had never previously fought each other. But from the very beginning, the Mongols bore a grudge against the Jurchen, a hatred engraved in their bones, vowing not to rest until death. The Jurchen, born in the land of White Mountains and Black River, had long endured oppression and humiliation under their Liao overlords. Eventually, their leader Aguda could no longer bear the insults and rose in rebellion, successfully founding the Jin dynasty in 1115. Yet, after Jin unified the north and entered the Central Plains, they failed to learn from the Khitan dynasty's downfall. They continuously invaded the southern Song and did not adopt flexible or conciliatory policies to govern the Mongol tribes on the steppe they once controlled. To achieve long-term plunder, the Jurchen rulers imposed brutal measures on the Mongol clans. Every 3 years, they would send troops deep into the grasslands, slaughtering every man taller than a wagon wheel and cutting off the thumbs of boys shorter than a wheel, ensuring that when grown they could neither wield a sword nor draw a bow. This prolonged oppression and cruelty did not break the Mongols. On the contrary, the hatred carved into their hearts gradually united them into a mighty force. When the Kiyad leader Temujin, later Genghis Khan, emerged, he ignited the long-suppressed fury of his people. For the Jin dynasty, Temujin bore not only a national enmity, but also a personal vendetta. His ancestor Ambagai Khan had been executed by the Jurchen on the wooden donkey. Therefore, after uniting the Mongol tribes, he immediately launched a comprehensive counterattack against the Jin Empire, their former overlords. However, the balance of power between Mongols and Jin at that time was still vastly unequal. Although Genghis Khan controlled the entire steppe, the Mongol population numbered only about 1 million, and the troops he could muster were around 150,000. In contrast, the Jin dynasty not only had a population exceeding 50 million, but also commanded armies numbering in the millions, a terrifying force. In February 1211, under the banner of avenging his ancestor, Genghis Khan solemnly swore an oath at the upper reaches of the Kurlan River, proclaiming a southern expedition to attack the Jin. All the soldiers of Great Mongolia, except for 3,000 cavalry left behind to guard the homeland, followed the Great Khan into the campaign. When news came that Genghis Khan was leading a mighty force of 100,000 horsemen toward the Jin border, Emperor Wanyan Yongji of Jin at first could not believe it, then was instantly seized with fear. Years of long-lasting peace had made this Jurchen monarch lose the fiery blood and bravery of his ancestors. Faced with the advancing Mongol host, panic-stricken, he did not think of organizing resistance, but first humbled himself to seek peace with the Mongols. Yet he quickly received a firm reply from Genghis Khan. This time he had come only for vengeance. Everything else would be decided by swords and blood on the battlefield. The path to peace was blocked, forcing him to grit his teeth and mobilize troops. Fortunately for the Jurchen, they had long anticipated Genghis Khan's rise. Over 10 years earlier, they had built a 600-li Great Wall in the northern frontier. This defensive line offered at least some psychological comfort to the panicked Jin emperor. Soon after, Wanyan Yongji ordered the Chancellor of State Yongji Estegom Chancellor to command 50,000 troops to advance north and hold the line. The Mongols, when moving south, inevitably had to pass through the route guarded by the fortress of Wusha Fort. It must be pointed out that the Great Wall of the Qing dynasty was not the same as the Great Wall we traditionally associate with the Ming period. It was not a continuous series of tall, massive walls. More precisely, it resembled earthen ramparts made of tamped earth, which the Qin people also called boundary trenches. Between sections there were many gaps, and the defensive line relied on surrounding forts and strongpoints, with large numbers of stationed troops to form a complete defense network. Wusha Fort was an essential part of this system, to completely block the Mongols north of the defensive line, in addition to mobilizing many Jin laborers to carefully reinforce the section of the Great Wall at Wusha Fort. Dugu Sejong also built a supporting base named Yuyue Camp to the southwest. This place could not only provide stored grain for Wusha Fort, but also transport weapons and supplies to the front line through the underground passage called Jinyu Road. At the beginning of March, Genghis Khan's great army arrived at Wusha Fort and immediately ordered his left-wing general Mukhali to launch an assault. However, this place had been under Jurchen control for more than 10 years. Its walls were solid, and the Mongol cavalry was not skilled at siege warfare. The Mongol forces recklessly attacked for 3 months, suffered heavy losses, yet gained no advantage. Genghis Khan began to suspect that the Great Wall could not possibly hold out so long without sufficient troops and provisions, so he guessed that there must be a secret supply point near Wusha Fort. He sent his trusted men to search everywhere, but found nothing. Finally, from the mouths of captured local villagers, they discovered a clue. About 20 li southwest of Wusha Fort, smoke and dust often rose recently, and Jin troops were frequently seen there. Yuyue Camp, originally a supply base, though in a concealed location, lacked strong defenses. Once exposed, its fate was predictable. In just half a day, under a Mongol raid, Yuyue Camp fell. Hearing that Yuyue Camp had been destroyed by the Mongols, the defenders of Wusha Fort panicked, but their commander Dugu Sejong still resolutely held his ground. Soon after, Genghis Khan employed an extremely cruel but highly effective tactic to attack the enemy. He brought the captured women warriors from Yuyue Camp to the front line, pushed them forward as human shields, and step by step advanced toward Wusha Fort. A painful dilemma immediately confronted the defenders inside. To shoot arrows meant killing their own compatriots, yet to stand by and do nothing meant disgrace as the enemy broke the fortress. In this complex and conflicted state of mind, the Jurchen defenders wavered in their resistance. Once firm and secure, Wusha Fort now became precarious. With its supply base destroyed, provisions and military stores gradually ran out. Dugu Sejong had no other choice and finally decided to withdraw. Wusha Fort fell, and the northern defensive line that the Jurchens had painstakingly built for more than a decade immediately lost its effectiveness. After the Mongol army broke through the Great Wall defense, they quickly advanced southeast toward Fuzhou. When news of the defeat reached Zhongdu, the Jin court was shaken. The fear in the ministers' hearts instantly turned into uncontrollable fury. The enraged emperor dismissed Dugu Sejong on the front line and replaced him with the Assistant Minister of State Affairs, Wanyan Chengyu, estegomting him full authority over frontline military command. Changing generals in the midst of battle was already a taboo in military strategy, and judging from later events on the battlefield, Wanyan Chengyu proved no more capable than Dugu Sejong. Although Dugu Sejong was a defeated general, From beginning to end, he had guarded the front line of the Great Wall, contesting every inch of land with the Mongols. Wanyan Chengyu, on the other hand, after taking over command, made his first military decision to voluntarily abandon the 3 prefectures of Huangchangfu, then lead several 100,000 of the main forces entrusted by the emperor directly south to Yehuling. Perhaps frightened by the Mongols' earlier might at Wusha Fort, facing an enemy burning with momentum, Wanyan Chengyu believed that on the plains, without the fortifications of the Great Wall, relying on a few cities offered no certainty of victory and risked being divided and surrounded by the enemy. Therefore, the Jurchen commander planned to concentrate superior forces, use the mountainous terrain, and at Yehuling engage Genghis Khan in an Estegom decisive battle. Even if he did not win, as long as he could hold defensive positions and block the southern advance, once the weather turned cold, the Mongols would be forced to return to the steppe for the winter, and the Jin forces might even concentrate their troops to pursue from behind. At that time, the outcome would still remain uncertain. However, this turned out to be a rather unwise decision. Before the armies had even engaged in battle, retreating despite having numerical superiority inevitably damaged the troops' morale. The 3 prefectures of Huangchangfu could be regarded as the second defensive line south of the Great Wall, and were also part of the northern deep defense system. The 3 fortresses had been maintained for many years, with solid walls and abundant provisions. Properly utilized, even if their defense ultimately failed, they were enough to slow the lightning strikes of the Mongol iron cavalry and inflict severe losses on the enemy. Out of concern for their rear security, the Mongols would likely not dare to cross Tanzhou directly toward the Jin capital, lest they risk being attacked from behind. Yet because of the imperial decree of Wanyan Chengyu, Tanzhou completely failed to play its expected strategic defensive role. Hundreds of thousands of civilians under Tanzhou's administration, along with vast stores of grain and wealth, were easily seized by the Mongols. Among these losses, the fall of Hanzhou was the most devastating. It had been the Jin dynasty's famous horse breeding ground. The figure of 1 million horses might be exaggerated, but even if the actual number was only 1/10 of what the chronicles recorded, such a loss of war horses was unbearable for the Jin. Both Mongols and Jin were peoples whose strength depended on cavalry, and the importance of war horses was beyond question. This stud farm falling into enemy hands not only rapidly increased Mongol power, but also left the Jin army in the future starved of mounts. The shift in power was severe, and the damage was truly grave. The loss of Hanzhou could be said to have stripped the Jurchen forever of the qualification to contend on equal terms with the Mongol legions. But the war continued. After Tanzhou fell, the life or death fate of the Jin dynasty pressed entirely on Yehuling, the place in which Wanyan Chengyu had placed his hopes. Yehuling lay between the Yanshan and Yinshan ranges, a relatively low mountain ridge running east-west. This area, located in the southern part of the Mongolian plateau, was the gateway leading down to the North China Plain. The vast plateau ended abruptly in steep cliffs, creating a sharp change in terrain. To the north stretched boundless desert, and to the south rose layered mountains. Because of its treacherous geography, this place had long been fiercely contested by military strategists. Judging by troop strength and the overall situation, the Jin truly had no reason to fail in the decisive battle at Yehuling. Earlier, during the defense at the Great Wall, because the attack came suddenly, the Jin court could only hastily prepare 50,000 troops for Estegom Chancellor, which left them numerically weak in the first engagement. But when Wanyan Chengyu himself took the field, after full mobilization, the Jin Emperor Estegomted him an army of 450,000. In contrast, Genghis Khan's southern expedition brought only about 100,000 men. Of course, the clash between the two sides was not simply a matter of comparing numbers. What mattered most was that at that moment, Wanyan Chengyu still held the advantage of natural terrain. The strength of mountain defense was that the Jin could exploit the landscape. With only a small force guarding key passes, they could withstand an enemy many times their size while limiting the mobility of Mongol cavalry. For this reason, Wanyan Chengyu divided his forces, stationing 100,000 elite soldiers at the Beishan Pass, the forward line of Yehuling, to block the vital route, while dispersing the rest to hold other strategic points. After Genghis Khan seized Tanzhou at the end of July, he rapidly marched south and by early August reached the northern approaches of Yehuling. But at this time, the Mongol forces were completely unfamiliar with Yehuling's terrain and defensive layout, leaving them confused. Then the Jin delivered an even greater gift. Wanyan Chengyu, encamped at Yehuling, still harbored hope for peace. Before battle commenced, he sent Shimo Ming'an to the Mongol camp to negotiate. Unexpectedly, this envoy was easily bribed by Genghis Khan. Shimo Ming'an not only handed over detailed topographic maps, but also revealed the complete troop dispositions and battle plans of the Jin army at Yehuling. This critical intelligence allowed Genghis Khan to immediately seize the initiative on the battlefield. Although the Jin army was numerous, its hundreds of thousands of troops were dispersed along the narrow, elongated Yehuling range. If the Mongols could break through Beishan Pass at the front, they could push straight south, rendering the remaining passes and garrisons useless. Seizing this moment with sharp intuition, Genghis Khan decided to concentrate his superior forces and execute a central breakthrough at Beishan Pass. The decisive clash that would determine the fate of the Jin and Mongol empires was about to erupt. Genghis Khan appointed Mukhali as vanguard, leading 30,000 elite soldiers to charge directly at the Jin positions at Beishan Pass. The mountain paths were already steep and treacherous, making cavalry assaults difficult. Wanyan Chengyu had previously stationed countless infantry with large shields to completely block the pass. On the heights of Beishan, numerous archers drew their bows, ready to shoot down any enemy who advanced. To Wanyan Chengyu, Beishan Pass seemed impenetrable, where even a bird might struggle to pass. Yet, at this moment, the Jurchen faced one of Genghis Khan's most valiant generals, Mukhali, one of the four great pillars of Mongolia who had entered the battlefield. Mukhali did not rush to mobilize his troops for a direct assault, but instead used catapults from a distance to bombard the Jin infantry positions. Massive boulders whistled through the wind and crashed down with heavy thuds, sending frontline soldiers screaming as they fell amid swirling dust. Behind them, the Jin forces, realizing the danger of the Mongol field formation, dared not recklessly advance in counterattack. They crowded backward, pressing against one another until the Mongols' stones were exhausted, by which time the entire shield and spear formation had fallen into complete chaos. Seeing this, Mukhali immediately ordered his entire army to dismount, switch to infantry combat, completely smash the Jin foot soldiers' camp at the base of the mountain, and then climb straight up to seize Huanyanzi. The bloodiest close-quarters battle began. The vanguard of the allied Mongol forces were warriors undefeated in hundreds of battles, carrying overwhelming momentum that no one could resist. The Jin troops, having lived in peace for too long, and with soldiers who had not seen battle in many years, found their morale greatly diminished when facing the Mongol cavalry charging through fire and wind. Blades clashed thunderously, screams and groans echoed everywhere, and fresh blood and scattered corpses instantly turned the valley of Yehuling into a living hell. Although the Jin forces were steadily pushed back, they still had the advantage in numbers. When the allied forces drove the Jin infantry back 3,000 paces and captured half the slope of Huanyanzi, they too began to show signs of fatigue and heavy casualties. At this critical moment, Mukhali shouted loudly on the front line, "Though we are few, we will fight to the end. There has never been a battle our strength could not break." At the same time, he threw all the reserve troops, including the 1,000 most bloodthirsty elite Mongol soldiers, into the fray. The situation gradually turned unfavorable for the Jin army. Wanyan Chengyu now realized the serious flaw in his troop deployment. His forces were spread too thin. Communication and coordination between units had become a major problem, and the long, treacherous mountain roads prevented him from sending reinforcements in time. On Yehuling, even though the Jin army numbered more than 400,000, In reality, only the garrison at Baishan Pass was engaged with the Mongols. By the time Wanyan Chengyu understood the situation, it was too late. Suddenly, the battlefield erupted with thunderous shouts, and amid sky-shaking cries of "Kill!", Genghis Khan led his main forces in a full-scale assault. The Jin infantry positions completely collapsed, and the Mongol banner flew over Huanianzi. Mukhali advanced like breaking bamboo, leading a massive force of death-defying warriors straight into the central camp of Wanyan Chengyu. The Jurchen commander panicked, his face drained of color, hastily gathered whatever remnants he could muster, and fled the battlefield at the fastest speed possible. After breaking through Baishan Pass, Genghis Khan's main forces quickly swept into other key points of Yehuling. The Jin troops stationed on the other mountain slopes saw the dire situation and, fearing their retreat would be cut off, abandoned their positions and fled en masse. By then, evening had fallen, and on Yehuling the smoke and dust mingled, while the crimson sunset resembled blood. The Jin army, leaderless, completely collapsed, trampling and crushing one another in retreat, with countless dead and wounded. Those lucky enough to escape were soon overtaken by the Mongol cavalry and mercilessly slaughtered. In this Battle of Yehuling, the Mongol alliance suffered nearly 10,000 casualties but annihilated the entire 450,000-strong Jin army, yet this was only the beginning of the Jurchen's misfortune. Wanyan Chengyu retreated, gathering several tens of thousands of routed soldiers from the front along the way. But when he reached Kwaihabaoshi, 100 ili south of Yehuling, he was again surrounded by Mukhali's pursuing forces. After 3 days and 2 nights of bloody fighting, the Jin army was completely annihilated. Wanyan Chengyu narrowly escaped death and fled to Shuangping. The Mongol alliance, seizing their victory, advanced southward, broke through the Great Wall at Juyong Pass, and by September had pressed up to the Jin capital of Zhongdu. Later, because the 9 palaces had not yet been established and winter was approaching, they plundered the Jingji circuit ruthlessly, and Genghis Khan then led his troops back north. The catastrophic defeat at Yehuling not only triggered a cascade of disasters to follow, but, more gravely, wiped out the elite soldiers tempered over 100 years. From then on, the Jin dynasty could no longer muster an army of comparable scale and had almost entirely lost the ability to face the Mongols in direct confrontation. In 1214, as the allied forces repeatedly advanced south and threatened Zhongdu, Emperor Jin Xuanzong, who had only recently ascended the throne, was forced to order the relocation of the capital to Nanjing. From that point on, the Jin dynasty completely abandoned the vast lands north of the Yellow River, was squeezed into the central plains, struggled in hardship, and could only rely on the Guani defensive line to block the Mongol advance. In this sense, Yehuling was also where the Mongols held the Great Assembly of Mongtai, formally proclaiming Ögedei Khan as the Great Khan of the Mongol Empire known in history as Yuan Taizong. After Ögedei Khan's succession, they began to arrange the external situation. In the Central Plains, they continued to inherit Genghis Khan's unfinished legacy, allying with the Southern Song in their shared resolve to oppose the Jin dynasty, while dispatching Tolui to borrow a passage for an assault on Bianjing, the Jin capital. In 1233, Tolui used force to open a corridor, advancing from Hanzhong through Jinhu to the Sanfengshan area, where a decisive battle with the Jin broke out, known in history as the Battle of Sanfengshan. After this clash, the elite troops of the Jin suffered devastating losses. In 1234, the allied Song Mongol forces entered Taizhou and the Jin dynasty perished. The Western Campaign of the Senior Princes was the second westward expedition of the Great Mongol Empire, commanded by Batu, Genghis Khan's Estergomson, with other princes such as Guyuk and Monka also participating. Because the various branches of the imperial family were led by the senior prince in command, with units from myriarchs downward assigned to their representatives, this expedition led by the senior prince was called the Western Campaign of the Senior Princes, or the Campaign of the Princes. In reality, the Mongol army was commanded on the front lines by the brilliant general Subutai, and its main thrust was directed toward the Kipchaks and the Volga region and beyond. After the war to destroy the Jin ended, Ögedei established firm control over the Central Plains and Central Asia. The land from west of the Irtysh River to east of the Ural River had been conquered by the Mongols and assigned to Chagatai, Genghis Khan's second son. But the Kipchak steppes and the Volga lands west of the Urals had not yet been subdued. In 1235, Ögedei convened a Kurultai at Karakorum and decided to campaign against the Kipchaks, the Volga Bulgars, and other tributary states. The Kipchak leader Holosuman, residing between the Volga and the Urals, feared the Mongols and sent envoys offering surrender. But the Kipchak chief downstream of the Volga, Bakhman, remained determined to resist. At that time, Volga, Bulgaria, Poland, and Hungary were fragmented into principalities, each autonomous and ignoring the authority of their Esztergomed princes. Germany and Austria were still entangled in the Crusades, making Europe ill-prepared to resist the Mongols. In the 8th year of Yuan Taizong, 1236, in spring, Chagatai Batu, Chagatai's sons Baidar, Ögedei's third son Guyuk, Ögedei's fourth son Tolui, and Mongke all marched with their own forces. From Myriarchs downward, representatives brought their troops as well. The senior princes were dispatched, Batu was the supreme commander, and Subutai oversaw coordination. Altogether, 150,000 troops gathered from various places and concentrated on the eastern bank of the Volga River. After the princes discussed their plans, each led his own detachment forward. Subutai led the vanguard to seize Belair. In the winter of that year, Mongke campaigned along the lower Volga among the Kipchak tribes. The Volga-Bulgar leaders and Bulgar's chief Bakhman often hid in the forests and occasionally ambushed the Mongol forces. The following spring, Subutai marched from Belair. Hearing that Bakhman had gathered a large army, Mongke advanced into Kaidu. Mongke attacked Kuandian and the offshore islands, captured Bakhman and executed him. From then on, Kuandian, the surrounding seas, and the tribes north of the Caucasus Mountains were all subdued. In the summer of 1237, the Mongols rested east of the Volga to tend their horses and decided to invade the Volga Bulgars. In December, Batu and the princes crossed the Volga, capturing many fortresses, including Kolomna. In February of the following year, the Mongols besieged Vladimir, the capital of the Esztergomed Principality of the Volga Bulgars. The Esztergomed prince abandoned the city, gathering his forces on the banks of the Sit River to await reinforcements from Kiev. The Mongols besieged the city for 5 days, and even forced Volga soldiers to participate in storming their own walls. Afterwards, Batu's detachments advanced to assault nearby cities such as Rostov and Moscow. In March, Batu launched a surprise attack on the enemy camp on the banks of the Sit River, annihilating the Esztergom prince's entire force. From there, the Mongols pressed their advantage, driving straight toward the ancient city of Novgorod, advancing at least 20 miles. They then turned south toward the northern Caucasus. Mongke returned to suppress a rebellion among the Asid tribe, while Batu crossed back over the Volga to the east to rest his troops on the Kipchak steppe. In the 10th year of Mongke's reign, Guyuk captured Timan Pass, opening the critical route connecting north and south of the Caucasus. That autumn, Mongke and Guyuk returned east. In the 11th year, Batu sent troops across the Don River into southern Volga territory. The Volga princes, preoccupied with internal struggles for power, could not unite against the enemy, enabling the Mongols to seize the cities of Bilay-Slaule and Khilny-Gofu. When besieging Chernihiv, the Mongols deployed massive stone-throwing siege engines. That autumn, Batu personally led the main army to attack Kiev, where forces from all quarters assembled. Batu ordered siege works to be built on all sides and launched relentless assaults day and night. On November 19, the city was finally stormed and taken. After capturing the city of Kiev, the Mongol army continued its advance westward, seizing Vladimir, the capital of the Principality of Halych-Volhynia, along with other towns within the Volyn River territory. Prince Danilo of Halych was forced to flee to Mazovia. The city of Volodymyr was occupied by the Mongols. At the beginning of the 12th year of Yuan Taizong's reign, the Mongols left 30,000 troops to garrison southern Rus, while the remaining 120,000 troops were divided into 3 wings to march on Mazovia. The northern force, commanded by Beitel and composed of 30,000 troops from the Chagatai clan, annihilated Mazovia's reinforcements and entered Poland. The southern force, led by Hebdan with 30,000 warriors from the Ugadai clan, circled around the Carpathian Mountains from the south. The Central Army, under the command of Batu and Subutai, led 60,000 troops across the Carpathians, heading straight for the capital Pest, modern-day Budapest, in Hungary, near which the northern and southern forces had already begun their advance. Beitel divided his southern troops into several detachments, crossed the Vistula River, and invaded Poland. At that time, Poland was fragmented into numerous small principalities. King Boleslav directly controlled a portion of the land, while the other principalities were autonomous. In February of that year, the Mongols successively stormed and captured Sandomierz, belonging to Boleslav, the ruler of Poland. In March, they captured Krakow, the capital of Poland, and set it ablaze. The Mongols then advanced into Silesia in Poland, crossed the Oder River, and besieged the capital, Wrocław. Henry II, the Duke of Silesia, withdrew to Legnica, gathering 30,000 troops consisting of Polish and German soldiers and Teutonic knights to prepare for battle. Beitel abandoned the attack on Wrocław and moved toward Legnica. Since Henry II chose to engage, at the beginning of April he led his army out to fight. The Mongols feigned defeat and retreated. Henry II pursued, but the Mongols took advantage of his army's fatigue, suddenly counterattacked, routed his forces, captured him, and beheaded him. The Mongols, pressing their advantage, moved south into Moravia, plundered and burned numerous places, and then marched toward Mazovia to join Batu. The southern army under Hebdan circled the Carpathians, capturing towns such as Ludin and Varadin. In April, on the plains of Hungary, they linked up with Batu and Subutai, the central force, then split their army into 2 routes to attack Hungary. King Bela IV sent only a small garrison to defend the Carpathians, stationed at the outer pass of Varmos. On March 12, the Mongols simultaneously crossed the Carpathians, stormed the defensive passes, and by the 15th had broken through them all. Batu led his troops to attack the city of Bors, devastating it. Upon hearing the news, Bela IV marched from Pest to Bors, assembling 100,000 troops for defense. The Mongols repeatedly assaulted the city but failed to take it, and the Hungarians refused to leave the walls for open battle. Batu feigned retreat. Bela IV led his troops out of the city in pursuit and camped west of the Sajo River, posting guards at the bridge to block the Mongol advance. The Mongols withdrew to a place where the Hungarians were unprepared, camped in the marshlands to the east, and then divided into 2 forces for a coordinated strike. One force, led by Batu, attempted to seize the bridge but failed. Another, under Subutai, moved downstream to outflank the Hungarian army. Batu then launched a fierce assault on the bridge defenders and captured it. At dawn, the 2 forces combined, surrounding the Hungarian camp from 4 directions and launching a surprise attack. The Hungarians broke formation and Batu opened a path westward. As the Hungarians fled west, the Mongols ambushed them on 3 sides and pursued them relentlessly. Bela IV escaped to Austria. The Mongols advanced to Pest and destroyed the city. In this battle, the Mongols also suffered heavy losses. During the summer and autumn, the entire army camped near Pest at Neusiedl to deliberate. Facing counterattacks from Austria and Bohemia, they quickly retreated. In December, after the Danube River froze, the Mongols again attacked Esztergom, Hungary's ancient capital on the Danube's banks. They surrounded the city, bombarded it with artillery, and eventually breached the walls. All the French and German merchants inside were slaughtered. After capturing the city, the Mongols burned it down. Batu sent Hebdan with troops to pursue Bela. Hearing of the Mongol pursuit, Bela fled to an island along the Adriatic coast. Hebdan chased through places such as Spalato and Kotor. Not long after, at the beginning of the following year, Genghis Khan died. Batu received orders to send word recalling Hebdan. Hebdan met Batu in Serbia, where they drank together. In March, Order launched another offensive. But by then, the Mongol forces engaged in European conquests had been weakened, no longer capable of sustaining campaigns in Europe. After Genghis Khan's death, Genghis Khan's descendants focused on securing the succession while the Mongol Song War continued. For these reasons, the Mongol ruling elite had no leisure to continue the European war. Batu led his troops through Wallachia and Moldavia, and by the start of the second year after conquering Menai, he reached the lower Volga and returned to his own camp. Batu remained to garrison the region, while the other Khans of the Golden Horde gradually led their armies back east. This campaign laid the foundation for the establishment of the Golden Horde Khanate. After withdrawing, Batu established a Khanate on the Kipchak steppe, the Golden Horde Khanate, also known as the Kipchak Khanate. The lineage of Yochi, Genghis Khan's eldest son, maintained power on the Kipchak steppe until they were eventually killed and destroyed. The Allied forces in their Eastern European campaigns fully applied the strategy of deep penetration into enemy territory and surrounding and annihilating their foes. They relied on the Mongol horses' endurance, explosive speed, and lack of need for special fodder to conduct lightning raids, denying the enemy any chance to send messages or call for reinforcements. Do not think that the Mongol invasion of Europe was a blind action by a disorderly horde. This nomadic cavalry had a tightly organized military structure, precise command, intelligence, and efficiency far superior to their opponents. Genghis Khan had 4 sons, all competing to serve him, something few men in history could claim. For this reason, he was the only man whose genetic legacy has profoundly influenced the entire world. So just how powerful was Genghis Khan? His Mongol Empire once occupied 1/5 of the Earth's surface. In the east, its territory reached where the moonlight shone, and in the west, the map kept expanding under the sunlight. Genghis Khan came from a poor, homeless boy, yet became a steppe overlord who made the whole world tremble. Today, let us explore the life of this once peerless hero Genghis Khan. The origins of the Mongols can be traced back to the Donghu. From the early Shang period to the Western Han, the Donghu existed for about 1,300 years. However, during the Qin Han era, they were defeated by the Xiongnu under Modu Chanyu and split into 2 branches. Those who retreated to Mount Wuhuan became known as the Wuhuan, while those who withdrew to Mount Xianbei became the Xianbei. By the 4th, 5th centuries, the Xianbei around Lake Hulun further divided into 2 groups, with the Greater Khingan Mountains as the boundary. The southern branch became the Khitan, and the northern branch became the Shiwei. The Shiwei and Khitan shared the same origin and were originally one people. During the Tang dynasty, the Shiwei continued to fragment, giving rise to many tribes, among them one that roamed the Argun River basin, the Nongwu Shiwei. From this point, the history of the Mongols became clearer. Mong or Mongol means eternal flame. From the 9th to the 12th centuries, the ancestors of Genghis Khan began migrating westward, transforming from tribes in the Greater Khingan Mountains into nomads on the Mongolian plateau. By the 12th century, the Nongwu Shiwei had completed their westward migration, making present-day Khenti Mountains in Mongolia their center of activity, primarily in the Kherlen and Onon River regions. Written records of Mongol nomadic history begin after this migration. After settling, the Mongol tribes multiplied and grew stronger. Among the Mongol tribes, famous ones included the Kia Jadaran, Kongirat Lataiksi Wuulyanga, and the Dajin. Temujin himself belonged to the Kiad clan. At the same time, other tribes such as the Tatars, Merkits, and Oirats inhabited the Mongolian plateau. They spoke essentially the same language as the Mongols, and all followed the ancient shamanist religion, worshipping eternal heaven as the supreme deity. In addition, the steppe was home to 3 Turkic-speaking tribes that used the Mongolic tongue, the Karaits, Naimans, and Onguts. Most of them followed Nestorian Christianity or Buddhism, with Nestorianism being a branch of Eastern Christianity. Looking back at history, Temujin's path to power is evident, from uniting his clan, then allying tribes, forming a tribal confederation, unifying the steppe, and finally stepping onto the world stage of conquest. So what is the difference between clan, tribe, and tribal confederation? From Temujin's full name, we can glean some clues. His full name was Kian Borjigin Temujin. Kian was his surname, meaning Kiyad. Temujin was his personal name, and Borjigin represented his clan. A clan was a social unit composed of people closely related by blood, relatively small in scale. For example, Temujin's father Yesugei was a military leader of the Borjigin clan, yet under his command there were fewer than 10,000 people. When several clans allied, they formed a tribe such as the Kiyad tribe. If several tribes further allied, they became a tribal confederation. By the 12th century, the Mongols were mainly divided into 2 tribal confederations, the Nirun Mongols and the Darligin Mongols. Temujin's Kiyad clan belonged to the Nirun Mongols. In 1162, Temujin was born on the right bank of the Onon River, in the Borjigin clan of the Nirun Mongols. As for the origin of his name, there is a story. When Temujin was born, his father Yesugei had just defeated the Tatar tribes Thishiu and captured their leader, Temujin Ugei. According to Mongol tradition, to commemorate the victory, Yesugei named his newborn son Temujin, meaning blacksmith or as firm as iron. From infancy, this man of steel displayed signs of greatness. It is said that when he was born, his right hand was clenched so tightly that no one could pry it open, and when they finally did, they found he was holding a red clot of blood like a piece of jade. This legendary birth matched perfectly with the omen of a great hero, symbolizing the power to hold life and death in his grasp. The Mongols had a custom. When a child was born, they would invite a wise elder to predict the child's fate. In the case of Genghis Khan, the sage did not wait to be invited, he came of his own accord. According to Qing historical records, the old man crossed dangerous mountains specifically to meet Genghis Khan. He foretold that Genghis Khan would one day accomplish a great enterprise. Do not underestimate this old man. Several decisive turning points in Genghis Khan's later life were closely linked to his guidance. The Mongols also had a special belief. They thought that if a child was born at the moment the tribe captured a warrior from an enemy clan, the warrior's courage would be transferred to the newborn. It sounded like a magical power that could absorb another's strength. As for Temujin, he was perhaps one of the most unfortunate sons of the steppe elite in history. When he was 9 years old, his father was poisoned, and the murderer was none other than the son of the Tatars chieftain who had been captured at Temujin's birth. It was clear that the hatred between Temujin and the Tatar clan was destined from the start to be irreconcilable. The story of these two families was only just beginning. On the steppe, the law of the strong devouring the weak operated in its own way. When a tribal chief died, the people of the tribe would quickly pledge themselves to a new strong leader without hesitation. Temujin's tribe also elected a new chief. According to custom at that time, after Temujin's father died, his uncle was supposed to marry Temujin's mother. But Temujin's uncles and elders not only refused to follow the tradition, they seized almost everything belonging to Temujin's family and finally drove them out of the tribe. For a nomadic people, being cast out of the tribe was almost equivalent to death. In Mongol records, this moment was likened to deep waters running dry and time itself shattering. One can imagine how desperate Temujin and his mother must have felt. Yet in this desperate situation, they took in an orphan named Borchu, who would later become one of the 10 founding heroes of the Mongol Empire, celebrated alongside Mukhali and Borchu Chelon as one of the 4 heroes. When Temujin's family was at its most desperate, the mysterious old man appeared again at just the right moment. He led Temujin to Burkhan Khaldun, teaching him how to hunt while also imparting to him the spirit of the mountains, teaching him to revere and worship this range. One could say the old man was both a teacher and a spiritual guide for Temujin. This mountain became Temujin's lifelong spiritual support. Temujin had a strange habit. Whenever he was troubled or confused, he would enter the mountain alone and seclude himself for 3 days. He regarded Burkhan Khaldun as a sacred mountain, believing that as long as he stepped into the mountain, any problem could be resolved. For Temujin, entering the mountain was a form of healing, but for his enemies, it was a nightmare. Every time he entered the mountain, disaster would soon befall his foes. Perhaps even Temujin himself did not realize that the hand of destiny was silently paving his path. Temujin's rise actually began with an unexpected calamity. He could have lived a peaceful life, spending his days with his wife and children on the steppe, but fate clearly had no intention of letting him live quietly. One day, his wife was seized by the Merkid tribe. This custom of wife snatching was not uncommon among the Mongols. For an ordinary Mongol man, losing a wife simply meant marrying another woman, but Temujin was clearly no ordinary man. To avenge this insult, he entered the sacred mountain and secluded himself for 3 days, and soon after, misfortune befell his enemies. This time, Temujin was no longer alone, he needed allies. He gathered Boorchu and rallied more than 200 neighboring clansmen to prepare for a counterattack. On the steppe, Mongols frequently moved their camps, building them one day here and the next elsewhere, which forged strong bonds among neighbors. At that moment, the mysterious old man appeared once again, bringing to Temujin's team a powerful warrior, his own son, Gelmi. Gelmi would later become one of the 10 great founding heroes, joining Jebe, Subutai, and Kublai as the 4 braves. The old man said, "My son was sent by eternal heaven, destined to aid Temujin." These mystical words seem to foreshadow Temujin's extraordinary future. 201 men could not possibly destroy a tribe. Clearly, that was not enough. At this moment, the role of Anda became evident. If you have watched The Legend of the Condor Heroes, you will be familiar with the term Anda, which refers to sworn brotherhood closer than blood ties. In the eyes of the Mongols, the Anda relationship surpassed lineage, even closer than real brothers. Temujin first sought out his father's Anda Wang Khan, leader of the Karaite tribe, who by then was already the most powerful Khan on the Central Plains steppe. But Temujin was not satisfied. He then turned to another Anda, Jamuka, who at that time had become leader of the Jadaran tribe. Using the bond of sworn brotherhood and with Wang Khan's call for support, Jamuka agreed without hesitation. 3 forces gathered, and Temujin prepared to launch the first battle of his life. In name, it was 3 houses united, but in reality, the forces of Wang Khan and Jamuka only added Estegomder, while the main strength remained Temujin's. When waging war, one always seeks allies. This was also part of Temujin's strategy then. The first battle was a great success. Not only did he rescue his stolen wife, but he also gained rich spoils. However, when dividing the spoils, both Wang Khan and Jamuka felt shortchanged. Though they said nothing, resentment brewed within. Soon, a second conflict quietly emerged. After the victory, at Jamuka's warm invitation, Temujin and his group joined Jamuka's tribe. In Mongol culture, there was the distinction of white bone and black bone. Direct relatives were called white bone, while those not of the direct line were black bone. This not only expressed the hierarchy of bloodlines, but also led to marked inequality in treatment. The bloodlines of Jamuka and Temujin could actually be traced to the same ancestress. Jamuka's Estegomd father was her first husband, while Temujin's Estegomd father was her second. Thus, Jamuka was considered white bone, while Temujin was black bone. Jamuka skillfully exploited this difference, loudly proclaiming everywhere that he was nobler than Temujin, disregarding Temujin's feelings and increasingly treating him like a subordinate. However, Temujin cared little for such bloodline distinctions. To him, closeness or distance of kin mattered little, high or low birth mattered little, and neither religion nor tribal origin mattered. What mattered was talent. He was always willing to treat others as brothers and employ those with ability. After the Mongol Empire was established, this philosophy of valuing worthy men remained and became one of the core strengths of Temujin. On the steppe, a truth upheld by nomadic peoples for thousands of years was that the strong rule. As Temujin's star gradually rose, the power of the tribes supporting him grew ever stronger. Those old followers of his father returned one by one. At this point, Temujin realized that an eagle's wings could not be confined beneath a small roof. His future was vast, and no external shackle could restrain him. Thus, he decided to leave the Yehuling River to form his own tribe. Old friends eventually became eternal enemies. Over time, Jamuka and Wang Khan step by step forced Temujin onto the peak of power. On Temujin's path to ascendance lay a heavy obstacle: the Tatar tribe. To understand the Tatars' significance, one must first grasp the historical context. Years before, the Mongol clans and the Jurchen tribes had been vassals of the Liao state, the Khitan dynasty. Many will remember the character Chao Feng in Demigods and Semi-Devils as a man oppressed by the Liao dynasty. Under Liao oppression, the Jurchen, led by Agada, revolted, successfully overthrowing Liao and founding the Great Jin Empire. As a result, the Mongols became vassals of Jin. After Jin destroyed Liao, they intended to use their momentum to eliminate the Southern Song. Yet they had not expected that, despite the Southern Song's weakened national strength, it would rise unexpectedly, producing iron-blooded generals like Yuefei who fiercely resisted Jurchen invasion. This, in turn, inadvertently created an excellent opportunity for the Mongols to grow. Perhaps everyone has noticed that steppe civilizations rarely succeed in forming a long-lasting unified empire. This is a striking difference from the agrarian civilization of the Central Plains. In the Central Plains, the primary mode of production was based on land. Land is fixed and immovable, so people settled permanently, generation after generation, and the imperial court could maintain order through taxation, conscription, and disaster relief. But on the steppe, nomadic peoples were entirely different. Their means of production was their herds, and herds move. They migrated while grazing with no fixed geographic location. Therefore, the tax and relief systems of the Central Plains could not be applied on the steppe. Social order on the steppe relied far more on clans and the alliances between them. The role of an emperor or centralized authority was relatively small. Tribes survived through cooperation with one another. The only force that could compel these small tribes to unite into a large confederation was often the oppression from a powerful regime in the Central Plains. In such situations, thanks to their cavalry advantage, the nomadic peoples could muster terrifying military strength. The Jin dynasty understood this strategy well. To prevent the unification of the Mongol tribes, the Jin court had plotted to undermine Mongol alliances and even bribed one of the strongest tribes at the time, the Tatars. Under the pressure of Jin oppression, the Mongol tribes had long yearned for a strong leader to guide them in overthrowing such brutal rule. That leader was none other than Temujin. However, the first great problem he needed to solve was the Tatars, because there was deep hatred between them. To defeat the Tatars, Temujin had to rely on cunning strategy. At that time, his alliance with his sworn friend Anda by the Onon River had begun to fracture. The Tatars seized the opportunity to ally with Anda against Temujin. Temujin clearly understood that the Jin court was constantly monitoring the Mongols' development and worked to prevent them from forming alliances. The Tatars joining hands with Anda clearly went against the Jin's interests. Temujin seized the moment and decided to turn the Tatars and Anda's cooperation into an actual act of treachery. He sent agents disguised as Tatars to raid the Jin frontier, intending to make the Jin court believe that the Tatars and Anda were indeed conspiring in rebellion. The Jin court was enraged. They dispatched envoys to hold the Tatars accountable. The Tatar chieftain protested his innocence. firmly denying participation in rebellion and expressing willingness to explain in person. But he understood very well that if he went to face the Jin court, he might never return like a meat bun thrown to a dog. Thus, he chose not to face the Jin but instead resolved to continue resisting. In this way, the Tatars' guilt was taken as fact by the Jin dynasty. The Jin court, furious beyond measure, decided to unite the Mongol tribes to punish the Tatars. Temujin was the first to respond, joining forces with Wang Khan to launch an attack on the Tatars. In the end, the Tatars were defeated. Temujin consolidated his power, while Wang Khan grew envious. In 1203, Wang Khan and Temujin clashed in a decisive battle. Temujin sent cavalry in a surprise raid on Wang Khan's camp and ultimately absorbed Wang Khan's tribe. By 1204, Temujin had completely unified the steppe tribes. From then on, no other voices were heard across the steppe, only the name of Temujin remained. At this point, Temujin lacked only a resounding title. Someone suggested he take the name Khor Khan, meaning Khan of Khans, but Temujin shook his head, saying the name, though vivid, lacked estogomdur. He decided instead to take the title Genghis Khan. This name symbolized dominion overall under heaven in every direction, and Temujin was deeply satisfied. From the meaning of the title Genghis Khan, it is clear that his ambition to conquer the world had been determined long before. Afterward, Temujin once again entered the mountains, this time to prepare for the Mongols' first great campaign. The mournful banner of the world was officially raised, and the Mongols' first large-scale expedition, the Western Campaign, formally began.